hello there. My name is Tabitha Gabrielle. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am like fully embracing nature and cicadas and chiggers sitting here in the grass, but you know, there's a spider running across my little table I've got set up. Hopefully the background noise isn't too overwhelming with the birds and the cicadas. I've got my opossum shirt. So this is Recent Reads number 2. If you haven't seen Recent Reads number 1, that's where I talk about all the books that I read for the first little part of this year. This is like books that I read from, I think, March till now, just to give you all some context. And I've got my laptop pulled up over here with my Goodreads reviews of some of these books. So the first book on this list is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. I actually did a reading vlog of this book, and I also did a video with my sister where I had her read this book. It was very, very fun. What I'm gonna do is read the little synopsis that is on Goodreads. Only the extraordinary belong in the kingdom of Ihli. The exceptional, the empowered, the elites. The powers these elites have possessed for decades were graciously gifted to them by the plague, though not all were fortunate enough to both survive the sickness and reap the reward. Those born ordinary are just that, ordinary. And when the king decreed that all ordinaries be banished in order to preserve his elite society, lacking in ability suddenly became a crime, making Peyton Gray a felon by fate and a thief by necessity. Surviving the slums as an ordinary is no simple task, and Peyton knows this better than most, having been trained by her father to be overly observant ever since she was a child. Thank you! Thank you! As I was saying, having been trained by her father to be overly observant ever since she was a child, Peyton poses as a psychic in the crowded city, blending in with the elites as best she can in order to stay alive and out of trouble. But that's easier said than done. When Peyton unsuspectingly saves the life of one of Ihli's princes, she finds herself thrown into the Purging Trials, which is the brutal competition that exists to showcase the elite's powers, the very thing Peyton lacks. If the trials and the opponents within them don't kill her, the prince she's fighting feelings for certainly will if he discovers what she is. Completely ordinary. I would say that's a really good synopsis for what the book entails. I've said it before, I'll say it again. This author writes banter like no other author ever. The conversations between these two characters and the enemies to lovers dynamic within this book is so good. It's like, it's the real, it's good. Like, yes. So if you like clean, romantasy type, dystopian type books, definitely read this one because it's a doozy. It's a doozy. And I feel like I never use that word. Why am I using it's a doozy? Is that a word? What is a doozy? Something that is extraordinary or outstanding of its kind. Okay. Yeah, it's a doozy. The second book on this list is Ready or Not by Cara Bastone. I listened to this on audiobook. The narrator was really good. She really brought the story to life. But the problem is, I didn't really love the story that was brought to life. Like, if this narrator had been narrating almost any other book, I think I would have liked it. But I did not enjoy this story very much at all. And again, I'm just gonna read the synopsis because it's not really a book that I feel like talking about all that much. A surprise pregnancy leads to even more life-changing revelations in this heartfelt, slow-burn, friends-to-lovers romance of found family and unexpected love. Eve Hatch is pretty content with her life. Her apartment in Brooklyn is cozy and close to her childhood best friend Willa, but far from her Midwestern traditional family who never really understood her. While her job is only dream adjacent, she's hoping her passion and hard work will soon lead her to a more glamorous role. And sure, her most recent romantic history has consisted of not one, but 2 disappointing men named Derek. This girl hates dudes named Derek, so all the Dereks out there,
stay away from Eve.
At least she knows what to expect out of life, until she finds herself expecting, after an uncharacteristic one-night stand. The unplanned pregnancy cracks open all the relationships in her life. Eve's loyal friendship with Willa is feeling off right when she needs her the most, and it's Willa's steadfast older brother, Shep, who steps up to help. He's always been friendly, but now he's checking in, ordering her surprise lunches, listening to all of her complaints, and is suddenly kinda hot. Then there's the baby's father, who is supportive but conflicted. Before long, Eve is rethinking everything she thought she knew about herself and her world. Over the course of 9 months, as Eve struggles to figure out the next step in her expanding reality, she begins to realize that family and love in all forms can sneak up on you when you least expect it. So, I have some thoughts about this book. I rated it 3 stars because I feel like it had potential. And there were times when I was like, aw, that's cute. But overall, I found Eve to be rather frustrating as a main character. It's just some of these things that Eve does doesn't make sense, right? Because literally, I think it's like the day after, this guy that she's had a crush on since high school, Shep, her best friend's older brother, the day he moves back into town, she is like so frustrated, she goes out and has this
one night stand with this random dude at a bar.
Like, girl. And then there's the whole thing of like, yes, Shep was very like sweet, and the way that he was willing to step up, even though he was not the baby's father, is very sweet and wholesome. And I mean, he was accepting of Eve and all of her flaws and all of her mistakes, which is very sweet. And, you know, I think that overall they're good for each other. But the way that the story was written and the way that they came together was just kind of for me. It was weird. It all ended very cute and happily and kind of unrealistically, I feel like. Maybe that's just the realist in me that's like, this is not how this would end up panning out, but okay. But okay, sure. I wouldn't read it again, and I wouldn't recommend it to you, because to me it was just not worth it. I feel like there are lots of other books out there that are way more worth your time than this one, so I'm just going to leave it there. So the third book on this list is Rebel Soul by Axie Oh. And Seoul is spelled like the place, so S-E-O-U-L, Seoul. This is a book that I listened to on audiobook as well, and I'm going to read you all the little synopsis as usual. I'm just going to give you all the preface. This one seems very teen, very like middle school. Like maybe I would have enjoyed this in middle school. It's kind of got that kind of vibe to it. East Asia, 2,199 or 2199, however you want to say it. After a great war, the East Pacific is in ruins, but brutal Neo-Seoul, where status comes from success in combat, ex-gang member Lee Jae-won is a talented pilot rising in the academy's ranks. Abandoned as a child in the slums of Old Seoul by his rebel father, Jae-won desires only to escape his past. When Jae-won is recruited into the most lucrative weapons development division in Neo-Seoul, he is eager to claim his best shot at military glory. But the mission becomes more complicated when he meets Tara, a test subject in the government's Super Soldier project. Tara was trained for one purpose: to pilot one of the lethal god machines, which are massive robots for a never-ending war. With secret orders to report on Tara, Jae-won becomes Tara's partner, earning her reluctant respect. But as respect turns to love, Jae-won begins to question his loyalty to an oppressive regime that creates weapons out of humans. As the project prepares to go public amidst rumors of a rebellion, Jae-won must decide where he stands, as a soldier of the Republic or as a rebel of the people. Pacific Rim meets Korean action dramas in this mind-blowing, New Visions award-winning science fiction debut. Okay, so I have a lot of thoughts about this book as well. It felt very disjointed at times. I'm sorry that my hair is like stealing the show here right now. My hair is stealing the show in the worst way possible. We're embracing nature. It's part of it, okay? The wind is dictating my hairstyle today. At times, this book felt very disjointed to me. Like, I feel like you could tell it was her first science fiction novel. I've read one other book by this author, and I actually really enjoyed it. It could also be that I'm not a super big fan of, like, the Pacific Rim robot type storyline, you know, super futuristic type storyline. It's not really my cup of tea, but for people who do enjoy that type of stuff in books, I feel like you might enjoy this. Like, if I had read this when I was in my Maze Runner era, when I was like 13, 14, I feel like I would have eaten it up and I would have enjoyed it a lot more. But as a 22-year-old, I wasn't super into it. There is a second book, and I don't think I'm going to be picking it up just because I wasn't that invested. I rated it 3 stars. There's nothing like bad about it. It's just kind of, it wasn't for me. So the fourth book on this list is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black, which is the first in the Folk of the Air trilogy series thing. It's not for everybody. It's like a dark, politically driven. It's got like mythical creatures and magic and stuff in it, so it's not for everybody, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm going to read you the little synopsis here. Jude was 7 when her parents were murdered, and she and her 2 sisters were stolen away to live in the treacherous High Court of Fairy. 10 years later, so she's 17, if you're not good at math. Jude wants nothing more than to belong there, despite her mortality. She has no morality. Oops. I said the quiet part out loud, I'm sorry. Jude wants nothing more than to belong in Fairy, despite her mortality. But many of the Fae despise humans, especially Prince Carden, who is the youngest and wickedest son of the High King. To win a place at the court, she must defy him and face the consequences. As Jude becomes more deeply embroiled in the palace intrigues and deceptions, she discovers her own capacity for trickery and bloodshed. Oh yes, she does. But as betrayal threatens to drown the court of Fairy in violence, Jude will need to risk her life in a dangerous alliance to save her sisters and Fairy itself. Yes. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this one because I've talked about it a lot before and I don't want to bore you guys. If you like moral characters, don't read this. If you are not a fan of political drama, don't read this. If you don't like magic and spells and stuff like that, don't read this. But I loved it. Okay, next book on this list is Grey After Dark by Noelle Ihli. I think that's how you say her name. I've read a few of her books, and I feel like I butcher her name every time I say it. So, anyway, however you pronounce her name, she's really good at writing thrillers. So, just to read the little synopsis, when a tragic accident sidelines Miley's dreams of becoming an Olympic gold medalist, she takes a summer job at a mountain guest lodge. The Frank Church wilderness is remote, but it's the perfect place to train and recover. Local lore about a staffer who died years ago doesn't scare her, but it should. Miley's plans take a terrifying detour when she's abducted during a morning run. Held captive in a desolate off-grid cabin, she'll have to use her athletic prowess, cunning mind, and courage to survive. But the nightmare at the cabin escalates, and Miley is forced to form an unlikely alliance and attempt a risky escape. Can she outwit her captors and survive the wilderness before it's too late? Inspired by true events, Grey After Dark is a pulse-pounding psychological thriller with a finale that will leave you breathless. And yes, it did! Yes, it did! I read this book almost fully, entirely in one day, and I was on the edge of my seat, like the edge of my seat for almost the entirety of the story. It makes me want to carry pepper spray with me wherever I go. The love interest in this was so sweet. The love interest, is another athlete, and it shows kind of their interactions before and their interactions after. He's like, no, she's still out there, I know she is, I'm gonna find her. And him and one of the other counselor dudes go and they end up finding her. Don't read it at night because it very well might freak you out a little bit, and I would hate to do that to you. But it was so good, okay? It was really good, and I would highly recommend. This whole video feels like just a bunch of word vomit, but it's okay. I'm living my best life. Let me live my best life. The next book on this list is The Wicked King by Holly Black, which is the second book in the Folk of the Air trilogy. Again, I'm just going to read the synopsis. Okay, well, this might contain spoilers, so if you're interested in reading this series, I will give you a timestamp to jump to so that you can avoid the spoilers. After the jaw-dropping revelation that Oak is the heir to Fairy, Jude must keep her brother safe. To do so, she has bound the Wicked King, Cardan, to her and has made herself the power behind the throne. Navigating the consistently shifting political alliances of Fairy would be difficult enough if Cardan were easy to control, but he does everything in his power to humiliate and undermine her, even as his fascination with her remains undiminished. When it becomes all too clear that someone close to Jude means to betray her, threatening her own life and the lives of everyone that she loves, Jude must uncover the traitor and fight her own complicated feelings for Cardan to maintain control as a mortal in the fairy world. I've talked about this before, but in this book there is one scene that I would consider a spicy scene. It wasn't full throttle, everything's on the table type of thing, but I would consider it kind of was it pushed the edge for me quite a bit. So just be aware of that, again, if this is a series that you're interested in picking up. The political drama in these books just brought me to life. Because, sometimes, the political drama of the real world is just a lot. I love a political system in a fictional fantasy world that can pull me out of the real world and make me more invested for a time in that political climate, because I do love political drama and political, just storylines within books. I think they're fascinating. I loved the political aspect of this whole series. However, like I said, keep in mind it is dark. There's not many moral characters to root for. But again, it's very politically driven, and so I feel like that, it's to be expected, I think I rated it 4 stars because it kind of lost my interest about 2/3 of the way through. Other than that, I thought it was great. The third book that I read was The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black, and again, I'll read the synopsis for you. This is probably going to contain spoilers. I'll put a little timestamp so you can jump ahead if you are not interested in spoilers. Power is much easier to acquire than it is to hold on to. June? Who the heck is June? Jude learned this lesson when she released her control over the Wicked King Cardan in exchange for immeasurable power. Now, as the exiled mortal queen of Fairy, Jude is powerless and left reeling from Cardan's betrayal. She bides her time, determined to reclaim everything he took from her. Opportunity arrives in the form of her deceptive twin sister Taryn, whose mortal life is in peril. Jude must risk venturing back into the treacherous fairy court and confront her lingering feelings for Cardan, if she wishes to save her sister. But Elfhame is not as she left it. War is brewing, and as Jude slips within enemy lines, she becomes ensnared in the conflicts. What is that? As Jude slips deep within enemy lines, she becomes ensnared in the conflict's bloody politics. And when a dormant yet powerful curse is unleashed, panic spreads throughout the land, forcing her to choose between her ambition and her humanity. Just right up front, do be warned, there is an open door spice scene in this book, which I thought is a bit much because it is a YA book, and it wasn't all on the table scene, like, if you know what I mean. But I did not find it hard to skim through at all, so I just skimmed through that. So be aware of that if you're a younger reader, or if you know of younger readers that are interested in reading it, just something to be aware of. There's a lot that happens in this, but it finishes very well. Like, it finishes as well as it could, and I'm very happy for that. If you're interested in reading the series, you'll definitely end up reading this one. If anyone is interested in, like, chapters to skip or particular pages to skip in order to avoid spicy scenes, let me know, because I'm more than happy to help you in that arena. I read this book when I was down and out with my foot, loved every minute of it. I feel like this series as a whole just kind of revived my creative energy and my creative spirit, and it inspired me to write, so I love it for that. And I feel like I'll always have a certain nostalgia for it because I really enjoyed it. Like, I enjoyed it more than I care to admit, honestly. So, yeah. The next book that I read is How the King of Elfhame Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black. And this is, all of these books were physical copies that I read. This is a little novella from Cardan's perspective. And I thought it was very, very cool. It kind of brought Cardan to life more as a character that if I had seen his perspective more from the beginning of the Cruel Prince book, I probably would have liked him more as a character in that book. In that book, I hated him as a character. I thought he was the worst. This little novella kind of brings to life some of his inner thoughts and some of his inner struggles from the very beginning when him and Jude first met and stuff. And so I thought it was very enjoyable. It's also beautiful. Like, the illustrations, because it's got these illustrations, and the illustrations add so much to the story, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful little novella, and I read it in a couple hours. That's how short it is. But it was just a fun little addition onto that world because I wasn't ready to give it up yet. So there are also 2 other books that Holly Black has written that also take place in this world, and they kind of focus more on Jude's younger adopted brother, Oak, and his storyline. So I feel like Jude and Cardan aren't really main characters in it. I don't know though, I haven't delved into those yet. I'm saving those for a rainy day. Eventually I'll get to them, but not yet. And the last book that I'm going to talk about in this video today is Winter Garden by Kristen Hannah. I listened to this on audiobook, and it was recommended to me by a real life friend who loves Kristen Hannah and all of her work. I found this book as a free audiobook through Kindle Unlimited. It was really good. It had a back and forth kind of timeline showing kind of the animosity that had developed between 2 adult daughters and their mother, and kind of how that animosity had grown over time, because I think all girls kind of go through a phase in their life where they struggle in their relationship with their mom. And so it kind of had like a dual timeline type of thing where they end up getting, these 2 adult women end up getting closer to their mother in their kind of midlife, like late 30s, early 40s. And they get closer to their mom and they start to understand her story, and you learn the mom's backstory through a series of stories that she tells, and you don't really find out that she's talking about herself until later on because she frames it as like a fantasy story. It's just very, very interesting the way that they put it together, and the way that it all ends up coming together is just so sweet and wholesome. I think it really just does a lot in highlighting the relationships between mothers and daughters. So the synopsis is, Meredith and Nina Whitson are as different as sisters can be. One stayed at home to raise her children and manage the family apple orchard, and the other followed her dream and traveled the world to become a famous photojournalist. But when their beloved father falls ill, Meredith and Nina find themselves together again, standing alongside their cold, disapproving mother Anya, who even now offers no comfort to her daughters. As children, the only connection between them was a Russian fairy tale that Anya would sometimes tell the girls at night. On his deathbed, their father extracts a promise from the women in his life. The fairy tale will be told one last time, all the way to the end. And thus begins an unexpected journey into the truth of Anya's life in war-torn Leningrad, more than 5 decades ago. Alternating between past and present, Nina and Meredith will finally hear the singular, harrowing story of their mother's life. And what they learn is a secret so terrible and terrifying that it will shake the very foundation of their family and change who they believe they are. It was really good, and it had a lot of true history in it, which I really appreciated. And it was a beautifully written story. For the last 30 minutes of this audiobook, I was in tears. I was crying because, you guys, it's so wholesome. And I think that it's the perfect book to end this video on. I rated it 4 stars. I would definitely recommend it. The audiobook is very fun as well because the narrator gives the mother a Russian accent, so it's very authentic. It was very sweet and very wholesome, and I would recommend it. So on that note, yeah, I guess that's all I have to say today. And I feel like I've talked a lot, and I feel like a lot of this has been just a bunch of word vomit that I'm gonna have to edit together and splice together in some type of coherent way. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope you're having a beautiful day. I'm filming this on Memorial Day, so happy Memorial Day. Thank you to all of our veterans. I hope you have an amazing, beautiful rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever other time of day it is for you, and I'll see you next time. Oh my gosh, 50 minutes, 51 minutes of footage. Oh no.